everybody, and I hope you're all doing very well. A good afternoon to you, good evening to you, wherever you may be. My name is Jamie McGeechan, and a warm welcome to Sounds from Scotland, live on the American Scottish Foundation. I hope you're all having a great weekend and feeling good. This is the very first of our new format of Sounds from Scotland, where every month we'll be joined by live guests for conversation, news and music, and I'm so looking forward to it. We've got a great show lined up this evening or this afternoon, wherever you may be, as we're joined by Iona Fife, award-winning singer-songwriter, incredible musician from Scotland, and we're also joined by Stuart Cassells, the founder of the Red Hot Chili Pipers, who I'm sure you may well be aware of. They are incredible, and I'm really looking forward to chatting with Stuart later on. But first up, we're going to have some music from the award-winning singer-songwriter from Paisley, Scotland. It's Lisa Kowalski with Hearts of Gold. And Lisa features on the Sounds from Scotland album, which the American Scottish Foundation released on St Andrew's Day, November the 30th. It's fantastic, and I'll be telling you more about that later on. So we'll have some music now from Lisa Kowalski. But yes, it's going to be a great series as we have our Sounds from Scotland every month, and I'm so looking forward to it. Glad you can all join us. This is Lisa Kowalski.
Waking up at 6 a.m. can be a hustle. Keeping my equipment on the bus too. The job to do the thing I love. Saturday's slightly empty in the cold air. It's brushing past me as I watch the streets fill up. And the streets are painted with hearts of gold.
That was the fantastic Lisa Kowalski there from Paisley in Scotland. Lisa is an incredible talent who deserves much recognition. She was heavily involved in Paisley's City of Culture bid in 2021, and she really is such a diamond. She's an incredible talent. And the American Scottish Foundation were absolutely delighted to host Lisa a couple of times at Tartan Week in New York, which was fantastic, and we very much hope that we can have that again next year. That was Lisa Kowalski. So wherever you may be, I hope you're having a great weekend. I hope you're having a good time, and thank you so much for joining us here on Sounds from Scotland. And I don't know about you, but for me, Scottish music is such a wide scope. We all have our favourite artists, favourite Scottish musicians, and I think for me, one of the things that I'm keen to do with Sounds from Scotland is show some of that wide variety of Scottish music and music that emanates from Scotland, as well as musicians in the US that are passionate about, Scottish music, Scottish culture, and look at where the two meet. But again, I'm just very excited that we've got the Sounds from Scotland show running monthly now. We're going to have some more music now from Paisley again, and Paisley is indeed a hotbed of talent. We are going to have Mr. John Rush. Hello. So in just a few minutes, we'll be joined by our guest, Iona Fife. But first up, it's John Rush with The Older the Grape, the Sweeter the Wine.
Chance with you, please adhere my point of view. For all that I have said and done, you'll always be the only one. And if it all comes crashing down, I'll turn that frown upside down. It's true. There'll always be an innocence, an underlying influence. When we watch the setting sun and all our dying days are done, let it wash all over me. Then I feel you plainly see it's true. 'Cause I'll always believe the older the grape, the sweeter the wine. 'Cause I'll always believe the older the grape, the sweeter the wine. Upon a crescent moon, made a wish to watch it bloom. Asked if I could be so bold, take your hand from mine, oh. With a smile you grabbed my glass, said you thought I'd never ask. It's true. 'Cause I'll always believe the older the grape, the sweeter the wine. I'll always believe the older the grape, the sweeter the wine. 'Cause I'll always believe the older the grape, the sweeter the wine. 'Cause I'll always believe the older the grape, sweeter the wine.
John Rush there, brilliant John Rush with his new single, which I just love. And John is a great talent. If you've not heard of him before, then you certainly have now, and I'm sure you're going to hear a lot more from him in the future. I'm delighted to be joined by Iona Fife, absolutely delighted. How are you tonight, Iona? Good evening, thank you for joining us.
Oh, good evening or good early evening to you. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a busy weekend, but lovely.
Oh, I'm delighted to see you again. It's been a while. I think the last time we met was in the was it the
Isn't it in Glasgow?
aye, I think that was like 3 years ago. 3 years ago, and time has flown. It's absolutely flown. But it's brilliant to see you again. Absolutely brilliant.
Oh,
Absolutely
it's
brilliant. No, I'm so chuffed we're speaking to you this evening. You are an incredible Scottish talent who does so much for Scots, and I'm so delighted we're going to have the chance to talk about that. For me, you are very much at the forefront of Scottish music and not only entertaining people but educating them as well. You were absolutely, at the forefront of this campaign around Spotify to get Spotify to recognise Scots as a language and a music. And I was hoping you can tell us a wee bit more about that, please.
Yeah, totally. So I guess for our listeners tonight, all based in America, a lot of folk don't realise that in Scotland we've got three national languages. We've got English, we've got Gaelic, and we've got Scots. So Gaelic is the Celtic language from Irish, very similar to Irish, West Germanic language, sistered with English. English actually comes from Middle Scots, which is why Shakespearean, works is quite similar to Scots in a weird roundabout way. Scots has got words taken from the Scandinavian languages as well as German, just lifted up and put down. And Gaelic is recognised as a language, which is great. They have a Gaelic Language Act of 2005, which was put forward by the Labour Lib Dem government, I think. But the Scots does not have a language act per se, which means that it doesn't exist as a legitimate language. The European Charter for Minority Languages recognises it as a language, and that was signed by the UK government. So technically, the UK recognises Scots in a roundabout way as a language, but Scotland does not. So my work as a folk singer is singing in the Scots language, and there's loads of different dialects of Scots. And one of my songs could be in the Doric dialect, which is what people speak in Aberdeenshire, and another song could be in like Ayrshire, which is, I guess, where you're from, Jamie. And another song could be in, Glaswegian or Shetlandish or, Dundonian or whatever. It just depends on where it's from. Unfortunately, I'm speaking to you all in English because it's just there's a mutual intelligibility of Scots, but it only goes so far. And I just think that it's really difficult to kind of get a point across if you're kind of speaking a different language. So that's the whole point of it. What I do is try and raise the profile of Scots and Doric by, putting pressure on the government to put a language act across, but also pressuring organisations to try and legitimise Scots by acknowledging the existence of Scots. So on Spotify, there is thousands of Scots songs and ballads that came from Aberdeenshire and travelled to the Appalachian Mountains and became part of the repertoire that was the basis of country music in America. So there's a real intangible, intrinsic link between our songs in Scotland and the songs in the States. But Spotify finally recognised it after like a 3 4 month campaign, which is really exciting. Having a huge global platform recognise an Indigenous minority language is really important. But in Scotland, it's not a minority language. It's a language that's spoken by 30% of the Scottish population. So that's 1.5 million people. And that was a conservative estimate in the 2011 census. So next year, when we have our Scottish census, we'll be able to have a deeper understanding of how Scots has grown in the last 10, 12, 11 years.
Why do you think it's taken so long for all these elements to come together? I mean, personally, I'm proud to have met you as someone who is at the forefront of this, awareness raising. But why do you think it's taken so long?
I think, unfortunately, language is political. Language is always political, especially when it represents a cultural identity, an oppressed cultural identity, I may add. Um, Gaelic has always been a language that has been recognised in some form or structure. It has a standardisation and orthography, and we can see where it has clearly came from. If you speak Gaelic, you're bilingual, but if you speak Scots, you are uneducated, you're lower class, you're poor, you're working class, you can't speak English properly, it's slang. That's the kind of discriminatory ideas that people have about folk that speak Scots. And that is why it's taken so long for people to overcome that barrier. Sing in Scots, write novels in Scots, create things like the Concise Scottish Dictionary, which is not concise at all, it's a huge book. Scots faces class issues that Gaelic does not face. Both Scots and Gaelic were oppressed historically after the uprising of 1745. I'm sure you all, are interested in that. But Gaelic did have a huge renaissance and is supported by millions of funding each year from the government. And Scots receives none of that funding, despite being a living language which is quite exportable. Outlander features both Scots, Doric, and Gaelic, which is really exciting. Things like Dinna Fash is being, printed on tea towels and stuff, which is actually that's actually a French phrase, fâché. To worry. There's a lot of, Scots is a really cool language that is, borrows, it's a very international language, which is representative of the Scottish people. We're a very internationalistic, we're an internationalist nation, and the language is no exception to that. But the thing is that for me, Scots isn't a tea towel language. It's not something that you put on a mug. It's a method of communication. It's a way of teaching kids singing or songs, or it's a way of people's career. Like, I know poets that make their career by writing in Scots. I know academics that have their career because they study Scots. Some of the leading academics in Scots literature and linguistics are not Scottish by birth. They're Polish, or they're from abroad. There's a huge global appetite for the Scots language, and there's a huge renaissance going on. And I think only in the last few years have people managed to go above this horrible class discrimination. And I think that's because we as a nation have more self-determination now than we did before. So there's loads of socio-political reasons as to why a language would thrive or not thrive. But for me, I think it's social media and the following and the international, the globalization of the language through social media. And I think that's really important. I did a degree in Scots Song. So my degree is in Scots Song from the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. You can now study Doric and Scots at Aberdeen University alongside other European languages, which is really cool. There's loads of things that's happening that didn't happen before. I also have another book to show you.
Brilliant, brilliant.
This is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. And it's the entire first Harry Potter book translated into Scots. I think they're going to do the Hale collection, but I don't know yet. But it's absolutely amazing, and the entire book is it's in a specific dialect, like kind of Lowlands, like Lowland Scots, as opposed to Doric or Shetland. But it's just so cool that kids can pick up a best-selling novel and read it in Scots. Because when I was growing up, I didn't have anything like that. Like I just, I didn't have that. So my own cultural identity and understanding of my own cultural identity was really difficult. But now kids can pick up Peppa Pig in Scots, Diary of a Wimpy Wayne, a lot of Roald Dahl books have been translated, The Neck Before Christmas. There's great media for young kids in Scots now, but there's not a lot of broadcasting media. If you turn on our national radio here, you will not hear people speaking in Scots. You'll hear a Glasgow, Edinburgh, and a token Highlander in the mix. They'll all be speaking English. There was one radio presenter who was very famous, and he spoke in Doric, and he retired. And since then, there's been no one that had a weekly show on our national radio speaking in Scots. And I think that is a huge, huge travesty. So for me, having a language act is not about street signs. It's not about spending millions on street signs. That's ridiculous. It's about changing the way that Scots is perceived. It's about allowing our children to have media in Scots so they become the next generation of teachers, writers, academics, singers, presenters, actors that speak in Scots. I think that's really important. So for me, I've got a rendition of Taylor Swift's Love Story translated into Scots, and that's coming out sometime this year. I don't know when. I'll just sit on it for a while. But that's really important because it's a pop song that's translated very well into Scots, but not in a humorous way. Scots and Doric usually have this like humour attached to it. There was a show years ago called Scotland the What. It was a stage show full of singers doing comedy sketches with loads of songs, put in there as well. And that it did a lot for Doric, but it also kind of put forth this message that Doric is humorous, and it can, it didn't actually make Doric be taken seriously at all. And I think that I would like to do the opposite of that. So when I say Taylor Swift in Scots, it is a serious studio production with some of the best session musicians in Scotland, and it sounds just very similar to her version in form and structure, but in Scots. And next month, as part of a kind of educational scheme called Youth Music Initiative, 517 Aberdeenshire school children will hear this in a class dedicated to the Scots language. So for kids between, I think they're going to be between 11 and 12, that's a huge thing for them to hear that and realise that speaking Scots is okay. In fact, it's a skill and it's really cool. And I think it's about changing perceptions. And for me, it's about making music, but also changing perceptions. So that I went on a tangent, but that's kind of the basis of what I want to do with the language.
Absolutely. Well, you're certainly a great ambassador for it, and your passion. You are changing mindsets, and you're making it cool. I mean, that's the thing. It should never have not been cool to sing or speak in Scots. But I don't know. I think that you're certainly changing mindsets for sure. And for me, I mean, one of the first things I ever read, that read like I spoke at times was some Irvine Welsh, obviously, and I was reading. This is great. This is brilliant. This is what's in my head. It's not how I speak, but it's what's in my head. And I as a Scottish person, changing language between obviously Scots and Gaelic it's a thing that we're so frequently doing. We're going to play a wee video from you just now. Can you tell us a wee bit about it before we play it, please, Iona? The Bonnie Lass.
Again, sorry.
We're going to play the Bonnie Lass.
Okay, yeah, I picked this for you picked, I can't even remember. Anyway, Bonnie Lass of Ivy is a song from the northeast of Scotland, and it is historically a pipe march. I do see Stuart Cassell's coming in here. So it's a pipe march. It's got a very noticeable melody, but what I've done is I've scrapped the pipe march and I found a version of the song that was collected in Knott County, Kentucky, which shows the universalism of our Scots balladry, that this song intact was found in Kentucky. Bob Dylan actually used this exact same transcript to create his version, Fenario, Bonnie Lass of Fenario, that was on his first album, and then he replayed it with a different melody, the exact same melody I'm singing here. And I think for me, it just shows the universalism of our music, and I think it's really important, especially cultural links and ties between Scotland and the States. So Bonnie Lass of Ivy.
Well, I fell in love pretty Peggy, oh. There's money last in less. There's money last in the Geary, oh. There's money I've seen in the streets of Aberdeen, with the flute o' the moss, pretty Peggy, oh. Oh, pretty Peggy, oh, bonny lass so fivey. Oh, pretty Peggy, oh, bonny lass so fivey. Well, if you would marry me, pretty Peggy, oh, if you would marry me, pretty Peggy, oh, well, if you would marry me, then I'll set your city free, and I'll spare all the people who fivey, oh. I'll give you ribbons and I'll give you earrings, I'll give you a necklace o' amber, oh. I'll stitch you a dress, silk and fleurs on its chest, if you afford and sort your 15 Mary, oh. Oh, pretty Peggy, oh, bonny lass so fivey. Oh, pretty Peggy, oh, bonny lass so fivey. Well, I was married to sweet William Moe. Well, I was married to sweet William Moe. Well, I was married to a former breather's hair to smooth. Knew I'll tap me for and sort your 13 Mary, oh. Oh, pretty Peggy, oh, bonny lass so fivey. Oh, pretty Peggy, oh, bonny lass so fivey. Twas early last morning when we marched away. Our captain said he was sorry, oh. Well, the drums they did beat like the ground beneath our feet, and the band played the bonny lass of fivey, oh. If never I return, pretty Peggy, oh. If never I return, pretty Peggy, oh. When I see the morning dew, oh, I will think of you, my bonny lass so fivey, oh. Oh, pretty Peggy, oh, bonny lass so fivey. Oh, pretty Peggy, oh, bonny lass so fivey. Well, along our wee cantailed meldrum tune, our captain we did carry, oh. But when we returned to the streets of Aberdeen, our captain we did bury, oh. The ringrow, the bird up on ice and side, and low lie the lowlands of Fivey, oh. And our captain's name was Ned, and he died for a mate. He died for the bonny lass of Fivey, oh. Oh, pretty Peggy, oh, bonny lass so fivey. Oh, pretty Peggy, oh, bonny lass so fivey. Oh, pretty Peggy, oh, bonny lass. Oh, pretty Peggy, oh, bonny lass so fivey.
That was special. That was incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Thank you. That's very nice of you to say.
Oh no, absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. You've got a crowdfunder on at the moment, don't you, to fund another project. I was wondering if you can tell us a wee bit about that, please, Iona.
Yeah, so over the last year, I've kind of been not touring, and musicians in Scotland have really struggled with the fact that things have not been opening up. We've been going through lockdown after lockdown. and not touring has given me time to figure out what like the next step is. And I was quite young when I released my first album, and I licensed it to a label in Germany and kind of threw away loads of money basically. And I just realised I wanted to do a new album with some musicians that I've worked with before. And I created a crowdfunder, and there's 12 hours left to go on it. It's been amazing, the response that I've had on the crowdfunder. £10,000 was given by Creative Scotland, which is awesome, a huge thing. But I smashed my target, which is great. But if people want to pre-order, my second album, as well as, I have a Bandcamp page where I sell my CDs, and I don't have any sort of label here. So if you buy a CD off my Bandcamp, then it's going to be me that's sending it to you, and all the proceeds, most of them from Bandcamp, go straight back to the artist, which is amazing. But yeah, the crowdfunder has got perks like, an early release CD and stuff like that, or a one-to-one singing lesson. Or some people have used that time for, social media coaching sessions. That's something that I do as well. I work for comms for Urvice, and I've been doing a lot of admin, loads of admin. But there's loads of perks that you can choose from, and I estimate that the project in total will employ around 23, 24 freelancers whose work has otherwise been cancelled because of COVID. So it's not just, it's a huge project, and I feel good to be able to offer people work at this time. And yeah, my single Scotland Yet was released in April, and I have another single coming out in April still, on the 29th of April. It's a song that's in class. I'm not a football person, but Aberdeen Football Club wanted a song for their social media campaign for their season tickets for 21-22. So they commissioned us to record the Northern Lights of Old Aberdeen.
Oh, that's perfect.
So that's coming out on the 29th of April.
Absolutely perfect.
And generally, if people can just sign up to my mailing list, I'll post a link. You can hear all about this stuff periodically spammed to you in your email account.
Where's the best? Where's your website? What's your website? Where can we direct people to? Because absolutely, we want to get them on.
IonaFife.com. I got that good domain. Like, there's no many Iona Fifes in the world.
Oh, there's certainly not. That sounds fantastic with the crowdfunder. So there's 12 hours to go. 12 hours to go. Everybody, if you can, and if you would care to support Scottish talent and the preservation and promotion of Scots as a language, you know what to do. IonaFife.com.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really lovely to be able to, speak a wee bit about the Scots language and have some songs. But I am excited to see that Stuart is here, so I'm gonna jump off the call.
Thank you so very much for joining us this evening, Iona. It's an absolute pleasure to see you, and thank you for your time, and certainly wish you all the very best in the future.
Thank you too. Bye.
Thank you so much. All the very best, Iona. Thank you. And we are joined now by Stuart Cassels. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, and thank you very much to Iona as well for that little call out. Fantastic. Really enjoyed her singing the Buona Lassie Friday. What a great song. She does it great justice. Well done.
Absolutely. No, it was gorgeous. Great production. And, I've only met Iona the one time in Glasgow, and I was just so, immediately moved by her passion for everything that she does and her energy. And I certainly do regard her as someone at the forefront of the rightful promotion of Scots as a language and music, and she's just fantastic. I mean, that was very cool indeed. Very cool.
Absolutely. Great energy about her. Long may she continue. Absolutely. And I'm going to be supporting your crowdfunder as well, Iona. I'll get on and do that as soon as you finish here. Well done, and congrats.
There you go. And someone else with a great energy about them is yourself. I'm so chuffed to see you again. It's been a couple of years since I've seen you.
I know you've not changed at all. Good to see you. I'm probably slightly more rounder, I think, than the last time you seen me, but that's what lockdown does. But you're looking fantastic. How are you?
You're looking great yourself. I'm doing well. I'm so glad that we're doing these Sounds from Scotland programmes live now on the American Scottish Foundation page every month. Really glad to be involved with this. I think it's going to be a great platform for talking about Scottish music and Scottish culture and the immense passion in the US for it. And certainly it's a privilege to speak to yourself, Stuart, because you have done so much, you do so much to promote Scotland and Scottish culture. So I'm really excited about this.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here and great to join any of my American friends that are tuning in. Good to see you. I'm tuning in from Culloden. That's where I live now, and it's quite nice to point out that obviously only 2 days ago was the 275th anniversary of the Battle of Culloden, which I think is something we should remember and take note. Obviously, the last battle that happened on British soil, but also really was the start of people, the Highland clearances and people moving to the States, and why our culture is so strong in America and in other parts of the world. So great to just take a moment to remember that. But welcome to everybody in America and wherever you're tuning in from. Great to speak to you tonight.
Absolutely, live from Culloden. Fantastic, absolutely. And so you've been involved in the promotion of Scottish culture, not only through music, but you've certainly done some wonders with music. And I was hoping if we could talk a wee bit about your promotion of Scotland through culture, through music to start with, as I'm sure that our guests will be aware of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, who are a global phenomenon, and you were at the heart of the beginning. You made this, you brought the band together, didn't you? You formed the band. I was wondering if you could tell us a wee bit about the genesis of that, and your experiences of performing throughout the world, and how people have taken to the Chili Peppers.
Yes, I'll try and keep it as concise as I can, because I can go on a bit when it comes to this. But ultimately, I've been a piper since I was nearly 8 years old, and I started performing for a Scottish music night that used to happen in Stirling when I was around 12 years old. And I did that kind of 4 nights a week, really, for American tour companies coming over and giving them a taste of Scotland in Stirling. And that really gave me a sense of what entertainment was about. And I really managed to, I suppose, hone the kind of skills in terms of how to not just perform the pipes in a competition environment, but also to use the pipes to entertain. And I think I always thought I wanted to be, I maybe looked at my guitar playing friends who were perhaps maybe a little bit cooler than I was, and I wanted to kind of show off a little bit the same in the bagpipes. So I would do that, and that, as I say, that Scottish night I performed that, kind of honed that skill, and I became quite popular then, playing for all sorts of functions and events and weddings and things. And I just seen, I suppose, this kind of opportunity for a band to come together that didn't just play the bagpipes like in the military style, which is fantastic to watch, but also played the bagpipes just in a bit more of a kind of laid back. And I was young at the time as well. When we started the Red Hot Chili Peppers, I was 21. I think I just started at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, as well as Iona was talking about earlier on. And I'd had this idea for a while, but hadn't done anything about it until my girlfriend at the time was helping me tidy up my flat in Glasgow. I was in a very typical student flat in Glasgow, and I had CDs all over the floor, rock and pop and jazz and folk music. And Gillian put it in a bit of order for me, genre order. And when I came to look at them later on, next to all my bagpipe CDs, she'd put a Red Hot Chili Peppers CD. And I said, why did you put Red Hot Chili Peppers next to all the piping CDs? And she said, oh, I thought it said Red Hot Chili Pipers. And I thought, what a great name. So I phoned my friend that night. But then, this is 1 o'clock in the morning. I phoned my friend Willie Armstrong, and I ran this idea past him that we were going to have a band called the Red Hot Chili Pipers, and we were going to play rock music in the bagpipes, and we're going to dance about and jump on tables and things. And he thought it was a bit mad, I think, at first. And we managed to get a few kind of early opportunities to play and perform at gigs from some friends and kind of contacts. And then it just snowballed. And then we were very lucky I seen an advert in the newspaper on a Saturday morning. I was reading the Glasgow Herald on a Saturday morning, and it was actually an advert for joining Big Brother. Do you remember the Big Brother show? And I considered it, but I mean, I think maybe tried to go on it as well. I considered it for about 2 minutes, and then I thought, and then in the corner there was another advert to join this BBC show called When Will I Be Famous, and it gave you the phone number, and I phoned it up, and they said, "Can you make it here in an hour because the auditions are today?" And I said, "Absolutely." So I phoned one of the drummers in the band and the guitar player in the band, and we made it along to the audition in an hour, and we got through onto the TV show. And then we ended up winning the TV show When Will I Be Famous, which was really just it's the same format as Britain's Got Talent, but it was, I think I'm going to say 2 years before Britain's Got Talent. So it was basically Britain's Got Talent, but without maybe the big budget that had, and didn't take off maybe quite in the same way as Britain's Got Talent. But we ended up winning that, and then all of a sudden, overnight, really, the demand for the band to perform at events and festivals and gigs all over the world just became really huge. And I spent, I think, around probably 12 to 16 weeks a year, I think, in 2 different spells in the USA, traveling between Scottish festivals, Highland Games, Irish festivals as well. So around about obviously St Patrick's Day, and then we'd be back kind of August, September time, and then we would spend a good period of our time in kind of Germany and Switzerland as well. So it was a great, great experience to have, and to think I took bagpipes to big arenas and big theatres and played, bagpipes was a dream I suppose I had when I was a young boy, but I never imagined it would really come true in the way it did. And it was a fantastic journey, really. Fantastic, great to look back on it now.
Absolutely. I mean, the world has never seen anything like the Red Hot Chili Peppers that you created. The world's never seen that before. As you mentioned, at the Scottish festivals, Highland Games, there's pipe bands there, but certainly in a very different style from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And you took the Red Hot Chili Peppers around the world, performing on concert stages, not just at Scottish Games and Highland Games, but on actual concert stages, bringing that mainstream to a mainstream audience, a wider audience, and that's incredible.
I think that was really the objective overall. We called the kind of first big album Bag Rock to the Masses because we really wanted to. That's what it was about. It was about taking the sound of the bagpipes to as wide an audience as we possibly could. And in some ways, whilst the idea was kind of conceived in my bedroom in that flat in Glasgow, what we did was we took the music of Gordon Duncan and the music of Fred Morrison and other kind of really kind of pioneering bagpipers, and we made it in a way, I suppose, we packaged it in a way with the modern kilts and things that we could then appeal to a wider audience. I would never claim to be the person that kind of invented that style of playing, because that style of playing was happening across quite a few players as such, and players that I looked up to and wanted to be like, and I would use Gordon Duncan probably as the biggest example, as a player who inspired so many musicians in Scotland, but absolutely as a young piper, he absolutely inspired me. And I just think I managed to take some of the elements of that music and make it accessible to everybody. And I think I was really, really pleased to hear from Gordon Duncan's brother, Ian Duncan, who equally is a very famous bagpiper, who told me one day that he said, "Stuart, there's been 3 things that have really put the bagpipes on the map." One, he said, Amazing Grace. When Amazing Grace came out in 1971, I think, that was big for bagpipes. Number 2 was when Paul McCartney did Mull of Kintyre with Wings in 1974. And number 3, the Red Hot Chili Peppers. They're the 3 biggest things that have happened for bagpiping. And I took that as a really amazing thing to have thought that. And I think he was a teacher of pipes to the schools around Dundee. And he said, immediately after that, lots of young kids were wanting to learn to play the bagpipes. And when I reflect back to when I was growing up in Falkirk, I was the only bagpiper in my school of around, I think, 2,000 pupils, really. And it wasn't really the coolest thing to do, whereas it seems to be pretty cool now in the schools, which is fantastic. And if we played a small part towards that, then that's brilliant.
Oh, you certainly played a huge part in it. I mean, I see the parallels between Iona singing in Scots and Doric, and that reframing how people come to think about it with the bagpipes, which, may at one point some people might have regarded as, I don't know, a bit niche or something, I don't know, or have a stereotype about it being uncool, whereas it's anything but, it's anything but. And it's so obviously uniquely identifiable. Well, this is debatable. It's being Scottish, you see some folks in kilts and playing the bagpipes. It's straight away you think Scotland. Although I'm sure many people that play bagpipes across the world, and I'm aware that it does happen in many cultures, would lay their claim to that. But certainly for me, hearing the sound of pipes here in the States is particularly emotional in a way that I never thought I would feel, Had you performed in the States before coming over here with the Chili Pipers, Stuart?
Yeah, I've had a couple of opportunities to play in the States. I was invited, I think one I can remember, I was invited to New Hampshire by the Strathspey Reel Society for their annual concert. And I was lucky enough to win the BBC Young Traditional Musician of the Year in 2005. And from that, I got a couple of opportunities to perform at different festivals. And that was one that came out of there. And I'd travelled to the States a couple of times. I first went to the States when I was 17. My uncle actually immigrated to California, and I went to stay with him for a period with a piper friend of mine. And we ended up kind of touring all over California, playing at all sorts of events. We were at Scottish events, we were at Italian events, we were at Ukrainian events, believe it or not. And we managed to raise enough money to get ourselves down to LA, and I played in a competition on the Queen Mary. There was a piping festival and competition on the Queen Mary, and I played in the competition. I got second, I think, if I remember rightly. So that was a great experience at 17 years old. And so there's part of me, especially sometimes with the weather we have in Scotland, I do wonder why I came back from California, because we were just really starting to really get a name for ourselves. The concerts were getting bigger and bigger. We were playing to concerts, just the two of us, of around 500 people. And two silly young boys from Scotland singing Scottish songs and just doing kind of silly Scottish jokes on stage. It was a great experience. So there for a couple of months, and then we came back to normality in Scotland again. And that was a great experience. Loved it. Loved my time performing in America and around the world as well. Everywhere we went.
Absolutely. We're going to show a wee video now that you shared with me earlier on. It's from Blast Live. Is that the name of the concert title?
Yeah, we recorded this in 2008. And I really kind of credit this as probably the last time that I played well, because very shortly after this, I started to develop a condition called focal dystonia. And it meant that my playing ability was curtailed, and ultimately resulted in me retiring from playing. So I haven't actually played the bagpipes since 2011. So I had a kind of 3-year period where I struggled with this condition called focal dystonia. And the last time that I can remember playing where I never had any issues and I was playing probably at my peak was when we recorded Blast Live. So it still holds kind of a little bit kind of emotional attachment because of that. It was a great show. I think we absolutely did something different in bagpipes. When you look at some of the piping shows you see now, they've all got light shows. There's always an image around it. It's planned out, but even pipe bands now are doing very, very choreographed and rehearsed theatrical productions. And prior to Blast, that wasn't really the case, I would say. So I think Blast did probably change the direction for pipes. And you see now all young pipers coming through, all playing in folk bands and fusion bands and things. And it's really wonderful to see more and more young pipers not just doing competitions, although that's great to do, expanding their horizons, So I think Blast in this period of time definitely had an impact. So good to hear it back.
Well, it's a fantastic performance.
Who out there wants to bag rock? And the man that puts the rock into bag rock is the G-Man!
was absolutely smashing, amazing, amazing energy, brilliant.
I forgot how fast that was. I don't know. There's no way I could keep up with that now.
Oh,
Not in any way.
talk about rocking, that was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So where was that concert, Stuart?
So we recorded that at the Old Fruit Market in Glasgow the night, I think it was the night before the World Pipe Band Championships in 2010. So we had a home audience, obviously, and a great crowd. Even right from the very, very beginning, the atmosphere in the venue was just quite incredible, actually. A really, really special night, absolutely.
It's a beautiful venue. It's a beautiful venue, the Old Fruit Market. It's gorgeous. It's got a very unique atmosphere about it. Have you got a favourite place that you've performed, or is there too many to mention?
Interestingly, I was looking at some of the comments here, and we've got a piper from Mystic who's watching. And interestingly, my wife and I watched Mystic Pizza the other night on the TV, and I'd forgotten that we had performed in Mystic for the St Patrick's Day, and I managed to find a few videos on YouTube to show my wife Mystic and kind of tell the story of Mystic. So there's so many places I think that we have, that we performed in that something like a television show can remind you of, and sometimes it takes a television show to remind you of, and then it brings back. I could, as soon as I watched the video, I could remember the whole town. I could remember walking around the town, and great energy in that town as well. So some great gigs in Connecticut, great gigs. New Hampshire Highland Games is always a favourite for the band. New York, we played BB King's 42nd Street. To see your name on lights on 42nd Street in New York, was pretty special. And then, in Germany as well, we played some great venues in Germany. And then we played quite a bit in Asia for whiskey companies as well, and really enjoyed that experience. And, travelled all over Asia, really. And that was a few years ago now. I think Asia's continually evolving, and it was just a wonderful experience to see Asia evolving in that way. China, Taiwan, Thailand, and other places.
Absolutely. And speaking of whiskey, which is something I never really drank until I moved to the States, which is weird, but it's something that you've been involved as an ambassador, haven't you, with whiskey, Stuart?
Yeah, when I had to stop performing the pipes, I needed to find another career, and I think I was inspired by the times that I had worked with whiskey companies and whiskey brands. So I set about pursuing a career in whiskey, and I was very fortunate to first get an opportunity with Famous Grouse, which is an incredible whiskey, Scotland's #1 whiskey for over 30 years. And then I became the general manager of the Famous Grouse Experience in Crieff, which was looking after the brand home and giving people a wonderful experience of Famous Grouse Angling Turret. And then now I work for the Macallan. So the Macallan obviously is a very, very popular whiskey around the world, but particularly I'm sure the people tuning in from the USA will know the Macallan. And I'm the general manager at the Macallan Estate. So again, I look after the brand home for the Macallan, and we have guests from all over the world who make the pilgrimage to the Macallan, a homecoming to the home of the Macallan, and we and my team set about giving them an incredible experience, telling them about what makes the Macallan special and why the Macallan has become the whiskey it has, with near 200 years of history. So it's a wonderful job to have, and I feel very, very fortunate to be in that position and promoting Scotland, which is really, I think, at the essence of what I've always done from the age of 12. From that period of time working for the American tour operators, Trafalgar Tours and Insight Tours back in those days.
Absolutely, a rich career. In terms of persons that are maybe wanting to go to Scotland on vacation for the first time, who are passionate about bagpipes, is there somewhere that people that might go to learn about the history of bagpipes in person?
Well, I'd always say a very, very good start is the National Piping Centre. It's absolutely right in the centre of Glasgow. It's got a fantastic museum of bagpipes. They can give you lessons on bagpipes if you book yourself in. I'm sure if you go into, they'll be able to do lessons online as well. I know they do lessons online, and the National Piping Centre is a charitable organisation there to support the growth of bagpipes. And I think the National Piping Centre has absolutely been at the forefront of this growth of piping as well, where we're seeing, the growth not just of the Highland bagpipes, but of the border pipes, small pipes, and they've been very, very inclusive. They ran the piping festival every year in August, and would have had pipers from Spain, from Asturias, Galicia, as well as from Eastern Europe, and it really opened the eyes, I think, of many people as to just how big the kind of piping diaspora is, not just the Scottish piping, but the world of bagpipes is a really wide, rich world. So I think we've got a lot to thank the National Piping Centre for. So I think that would be the first stop.
Absolutely. And with the return of travel when we get there, I know that a lot of people obviously in the US and Canada will be very keen to visit Scotland for the Pipe Band Championships. Would you have an update about how things are looking with that at the moment?
Yes, I think I did read something very recently that the Pipe Band Association are now looking at how they can structure, I suppose, a roadmap of their own, and to bring in competitions back. But it looks difficult for this year. On my personal side, anyway, I would think it would be difficult for us to have a competition of in the same way as it would have been as an outside competition with big crowds and things. But I think I would like to see a little bit of innovation from the Royal Scottish Pipe Band Association to perhaps use, as we've seen other people using digital means to do an online World Pipe Band Championship. There's an opportunity to do that rather than just being completely defeatist and saying, let's do nothing. It's better to do something than nothing, is my own view. So it'd be nice to see. And I think there's an opportunity for pipe bands to further evolve how they present themselves in competition. So this like anything, where there's change, there's always opportunity. I think there's an opportunity here for pipe bands to do more of a concert setting in their their performances and things. That can be more appealing to a wider audience as well. And if it was all broadcast online, then more people could enjoy it. Well, having said that, the last few years they have broadcast it through the BBC, and it's been very popular. So big events, I think, might happen towards the end of the year in Scotland, but generally the pipe band season is in the summer months where the rain is at its best, usually. So we'll see what happens. Watch this space. But I think light at the end of the tunnel, so that's good news.
Absolutely, it's all positive looking forward. There's much to look forward to. Certainly, I was very pleased to see the news about the Edinburgh International Festival will be welcoming audiences back in person for socially distanced events, performances outside, all outside, for the first time in its history. And the American Scottish Foundation has a list of Highland Games updates compiled by Michael Reid, which is available on the American Scottish Foundation website, americanscottishfoundation.org. There's a great list there which is updated regularly by Michael Reid. Because we're also keen to get back to being together, having fun, and hearing some music. So hopefully it won't be too long before we get the chance to do that again. Hopefully not.
Absolutely. And look, thanks to everybody's support of bands and musicians. I would like to maybe mention next week, I'm presenting the Skerryvore concert, and they're doing that live on board a boat called Fingal, which is a wonderful new boat next to the Royal Yacht Britannia in Edinburgh Hotel in the middle of Edinburgh, and they're doing a live stream from Fingal. So Skerryvore, if you've not checked out the band Skerryvore, check them out. But I think, like Iona said earlier on, supporting not just even the musicians, but all of the people who would have been involved in setting up shows and things at this particular time would be really, really good, because we can't afford to let our arts suffer in the way that it has done for too much longer.
Absolutely, and like you said, even though there are challenges, there's opportunity there to innovate, and certainly as artists and people passionate about the arts, we're always looking for that, always looking for ways to innovate and just keep going, basically. And that's why it's so appreciated that people continue to support the arts from Scotland as well as in Canada and the US as well. So we're all very grateful to everyone out there for your continued support for the arts and what we do. Very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you today, Stuart. An absolute pleasure. I'm so chuffed to see you.
And you too, Jamie. Great to see you, and I look forward to seeing you in person somewhere sometime soon. I'm sure it will happen. So thanks very much for the invite, and thanks to everybody who's tuned in to watch as well. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Mr. Stuart Cassells, take care and see you again soon. Thank you so much. And thanks very much to Iona Fife for joining us on the show today. It was a brilliant insight into Scots, and I'm really grateful that she had the opportunity to join us. As Iona mentioned, she has probably 11 hours left now on her Kickstarter, so if you would like to visit Iona's website, it's ionafife.com. And thanks again to Iona for joining us, and to Stuart Cassels. We've come to the end of the show now, folks. Thanks so much for being with us, and for any other updates on our Sounds from Scotland programme, we'll share them on our American Scottish Foundation Facebook page, Twitter and Instagram, as well as on the American Scottish Foundation website as well. So it's been a pleasure. I hope you have a great rest of your Sunday, wherever you may be, and look forward to joining you again next month.